Hello everybody, I am Jarrett Ross, the Genie Vlogger, and welcome back to another Professional Genealogist Reacts. On today's video, I will be reacting to my DNA heritage test results. I was shocked by Geography Now. I am super excited for this video, and this is one of my biggest requested videos in a long time, and I've gotten about 24 different comments, messages, texts, all sorts of stuff saying to check it out. Even my roommate was telling me that I should do a reaction to this one. And I think it will be quite interesting because the Geography Now channel goes really in depth into the history of countries and populations and all these different things that make it really complicated to try to say where your ancestry is coming from. So I imagine they're going to have a really good idea of what's going on and be able to interpret it a bit better than most. Now, I assume the host of Geography Now, Barb, is going to be the one to take the DNA test, although there is a team of people, so I wonder, are there going to be multiple DNA tests? He's one of those people that has kind of an ethnically ambiguous look to him. Like, I could totally see him saying that he was fully European. I could also see him saying that he was a mix of a whole bunch of stuff, although I'm pretty sure that he does have Italian ancestry because I know I've seen his last name, which is Barbato, but it's a Italian name from what I know. So I imagine he has some sort of Italian ancestry. But I'm not going to spend too much time guessing, so before we jump into the video, be sure to give this a like. That really does help me out. Also, be sure to subscribe and click that bell for notifications on future videos. With all that fun stuff said, let's just jump into the video.
What is my heritage? It's gonna be about me. So a long time ago, Geography Ben hit me up, and he works for myheritage.com, and he sent in a kit for Fan Friday. Now, I've wanted to take a DNA test for a while, mostly because I come from what you might call a complicated ethnic background. See, I am what you would call a second generation Hapa. What is a Hapa? A Hapa is someone who is half Asian. It's derived from the Hawaiian word Hapa, which means half. Hawaii has a ton of Hapas. I went there, I was like, whoa, I actually kind of fit in somewhere for once in my life. But anyway, long story short, both my parents are Hapas. They were born in Korea between American soldiers and Korean women. My grandfathers were deployed back to the US. My parents grew up in Korea. So from a young age, I was always told right from the get-go, Paul, you are half Korean. And then they always told me, on your dad's side, he is half Italian. And on your mom's side, we assume her dad is Irish French. So my whole life, I thought I was Korean, Italian, Irish, French. My dad was very lucky though. As he got older, he actually found his biological father and they reunited after all these years. And before my dad passed away, he was able to meet the whole family. That's really crazy. Some of them are straight up, like, I even did the heritage trip where I went to that one town where all my Italian ancestors came from. The lady in the house was like super bapara boopy Italian. She like served us coffee in a mocha pot. According to the story, I was told my great grandfather was like in the mafia, and then he left the mafia because his wife was like, I'm gonna leave you if you keep doing the mafia. So he stopped mafia-ing, and then he ran away to California and became an Italian organ grinder street performer with a monkey. I don't know how he got the monkey. Maybe it was part of his severance package. I don't know. The point is, I come from monkey people. Mom's side is a little more obscured with enigma. She never reunited with her biological father shortly after she was born. He was deployed back to the US. American soldiers were not allowed to marry Korean women back in those days because it was fear of espionage, and plus it was post-war era, so you couldn't go back to a place that was recovering from war. Complicated. But my mom was told her biological father was Irish and French.
If this just came out, that means he still has not figured out who his mom's biological father is. So I know I had a few people suggest it, but if Barb, you're watching and you want a professional genealogist to dig into this stuff, hit me up and be on my YouTuber Family Tree series, because I would be happy to see what I can do. I might be able to figure out who your mom's biological father was and actually build that side of your family tree. And of course, I can probably help on your dad's side too. Although I probably won't be that good with the Korean stuff because I haven't done much Korean genealogy.
Going into this DNA test, I was kind of hoping, look, I don't really care what the percentages are. I just hope I'm at least a little bit French. Come on, I gotta have at least...
Now, I will say he might get French readings. I know he said it's a MyHeritage test. I don't remember how they define it. But sometimes these companies will define things differently. So you might have French ancestry, but you don't get a French reading. But of course, it could be that maybe the family was from more southeastern France and they start getting readings that are more German for some reason, and so a company defines it as Germanic Empire. Or maybe they came more from the Basque region and you start getting Iberian readings instead of what you'd think is French. So you know, it could go either way. But then again, that's one reason why I'm excited to see him interpret his results, because this is something he discusses a lot in a lot of his videos. So
at least a little bit, please. I mean, not trying to like sidestep the Irish and Italian and Korean stuff. I mean, it's just, I don't know, something about I'm just drawn into the French stuff. So I took the test, and it's very interesting. So I'm going to show you guys what the test says. So first off, let's go to the continent where I am most confident in, Asia. I mean, there's really nothing to question there. I mean, both my grandmas are straight up Korean. I know there's a little bit of questionable stuff on my grandma on my mom's side, because she said she had like a grandfather that had red hair and blue eyes. I don't know. But if you look at both my grandmas, they're super Korean. I can't question my grandmothers. So I took the test, and this is what it says for Asia. 25.2% Japanese Korean. First of all, 25.2%? What? I thought Korean obviously would be the biggest, but I'm only half of what I thought I was. I'm like 25.2% Korean / Japanese.
But is he getting other Asian readings because maybe some of that Korean ancestry he thinks he has came from somewhere else before Korea? So
we get lumped together because, you know, DNA stuff, but whatever.
But of course, if his grandmother had a grandparent with red hair and was probably European or something, that means that that grandmother would have been at least 25% European, meaning that he wouldn't be getting 50% Asian. He would probably be getting a little less. But well, yeah, let's see.
The point is, that's substantially lower than what I thought it would be. What is the rest of Asia? Apparently, Chinese Vietnamese, 17.8%.
Okay, yeah.
Central Asian, 9.2%. It's kind of like, okay, let's think of it. If you think of history, you know, of course, okay, like Genghis Khan, you know, all those dynasties, they kind of like had babies with everybody, and you're going to get some kind of genetic admixture amongst Asia, especially East Asia, you know, like Koreans, Mongolians, Japanese, Chinese. They're all going to kind of have some kind of mixture amongst each other. I get that. But this is pretty cool too. It's like Central Asia. So like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, all that stuff over there. So that means I could potentially have a little bit of Turkic heritage, or maybe even a little bit of Persian. Who knows? All that stuff over there, Central Asia.
I discuss Asian-based DNA tests a lot in recent videos because there are a lot of Asian-based DNA tests now available. And I'd be interested to see what his came out if he were to do 23 Fong or Circle DNA or WeGene or one of those.
Maybe one of my great-great-grandmothers was like playing around with Genghis Khan. Who knows? All right. So now let's move on to the next continent that I was fairly confident, Europe. Because, you know, both my parents were mixed between Caucasian Americans and Korean women, so Europe. Now again, I was told I was always Italian, Irish, and French. Pretty confident with the Italian stuff because I've met my Italian relatives, you know, Bapara Bupi. So I figured Italian was probably going to be the largest percentage. From there, mom's side, a little shrouded in mystery, wasn't exactly sure what to expect, but I was pretty confident in Italian. I take the test, and this is what it says. Oh, I got Italian, but only 6.6%, and it's not even the largest one. Now, here's where things get a little crazy. So then, the next largest one, I'm pretty sure I got this from my mom's side, Irish, Scottish, Welsh, 8.8%. And then English, 6.5. English, Irish people, they mix a lot. So, okay, I didn't expect that, but it kind of makes sense. Then it turns out, I don't even have any French. Not even 1%. Not even half of 1%. I'm not even anything French. Unless you want to consider the Brittany region of France, which is technically...
But one thing with these DNA tests, when you're talking about English, Irish populations going back and forth, you need to get a little bit bigger than that and think more about Northwestern Europeans going back and forth and all over the place. I mean, think about the population migrations between France, England, and Ireland for thousands of years. But if his family does come from that part of France, it would certainly make even more sense. But I do also see that Denmark and then Norway, Sweden, Finland are probably covered up there, which I think are the Scandinavian readings. And as I've discussed in many of my videos pertaining to Northwestern European ancestry, it all kind of is this big amalgamation. And yeah, they can figure out certain stretches of DNA that can be placed to certain population groups. But even then, it's really, really difficult to be able to read precisely within Northwestern European because of all of the population migrations back and forth and throughout. And if he were to actually get family research done and trace out the family tree, he may find a lot of family living in France, but doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, they'll get French readings. And of course, they might have only lived in France for a couple of hundred years, but it was the last place that they lived before they came to America. Kind of in the same way that my Sephardic Jewish ancestry lived in the Netherlands for hundreds of years. It's not like I'm going to take a DNA test and get Dutch ancestry, but my family was in the Netherlands. They were in Amsterdam.
Considered part of the Celtic genetic haploid group, whatever you call it. If that's the case, then maybe by like desperate reaching.
And it's not haploid group. He's thinking haplogroup, which is specifically like your maternal line or your paternal line. So not quite the same thing, but I get what he's saying.
Default, I could claim I'm kind of maybe French if it's the Brittany province, but other than that, I didn't get anything from...
Yeah, exactly. What even really is a French person anyway? That's the big difficulty with northwestern France. Who really is Dutch? Who really is Belgian? It's just really difficult to try to decipher the DNA from throughout Europe. You can get good ideas of it, but especially basing it on the understanding we have of today's borders, it's not going to work well. I mean, they try, they do it all right, but, you know, as we see in these videos all the time, it's not perfect.
France. But get this is what I got instead. This is the largest percentage. Scandinavian, 11%. Scandinavian? I did not see that coming. I'm a Viking? Literally, after I got this, I called up everybody that I knew that was Scandinavian. This was probably the biggest shocker. I kept scrolling around, and apparently
Genetic matches?
13.6% Sephardic Jewish North African. What? I'm African! Now, granted, okay, Sephardic Jewish North African, usually that applies to like the Arabized community or like North African Maghrebi people.
Yeah, but the thing is that Sephardic Jewish is one of those ones that's really only defined by MyHeritage, and I think Family Tree tries to. But the truth is that trying to decipher the specific types of Jewish is really, really difficult. Part of the issue here is that MyHeritage is one of the few websites that actually takes the chance to try to define Sephardic Jewish, and they call only North African Sephardic Jewish. So it completely discards the idea of Western Sephardic communities in Amsterdam, London, Americas, or even the Eastern Sephardic communities in Istanbul, Thessalonica, Ottoman Empire sort of places. So whenever I see someone with a Sephardic North African reading from MyHeritage, I think of it in a lot of ways because it could mean a lot of things. It could mean that he just has North African ties. Could mean that he does have specifically North African Sephardic ties. Could mean that he has Mizrahi Jewish ancestry. Could also mean that he has Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry, or even maybe he has Western Sephardic Jewish ancestry, and that French ancestry that he thought he had, well, actually, it's some Jewish Sephardic ancestry that traces to the Basque area, which had a lot of Jewish communities. I even have multiple lines of my family that trace back to 17th century Bayonne and Bordeaux. So unfortunately, there's not a whole lot you can pull out of a reading like that because there are so many questions, and unfortunately, MyHeritage does not release a white paper, so we have no idea what are the recall and precision numbers for the Sephardic reading on their admixtures. But some of the companies that do release white papers don't even try to define Sephardic, and they'll usually either just say European Jewish. Sometimes they might say Ashkenazi Jewish, but they really mean just European Jewish. But even European Jewish could apply to Jews living in places outside of Europe. So it's super, super, super complicated. But of course, he could also have Sephardic ties to North Africa, even if he does come from other Sephardic ancestry, because I come from Western Sephardic ancestry, but I also have family lines which trace to Morocco and Tunisia. So let's continue and see what else he's got to say.
But, let's be real,
Matches,
North Africa
matches.
does have some black people, okay? There's some black people in North Africa. Let's be real, okay? Some of those Berbers are straight up black. And Sephardic Jewish, like, I guess I'm Jewish. Literally, I hit up Keith and I'm like, haha, mazel tov. But I'm pretty sure this has to be from my dad's side because, Southern Italians, they mixed in a lot with the Mediterranean and North African
Certainly could be.
communities, especially during Roman Empire times. If it's on the patrilineal side, then I don't know if I'm allowed to claim Jewish lineage, because it's like...
This comes up a lot too, and in a few of my recent videos talking about Jewish ancestry in Nova Scotia, I had a couple of people commenting things like, well, if it's not coming from your mom's side, then you're not Jewish. And the truth is that That's a purely religious way to look at it. And when we're doing what I'm doing, genealogy and family ancestry, our focus isn't about, well, who's a Jew and who can claim they're a Jew. It's who has Jewish ancestry. And that has nothing to do with whether it's from your mom's side or your dad's side or whatever, which is what he's really talking about. It's really just a matter of, do you have ancestors who consider themselves Jewish? So in the sense of the fact that he's just discussing his ancestry, if he does have Jewish ancestors, then he has Jewish ancestry. Doesn't matter if it's through his dad's side.
Matrilineal. I don't know. I don't think I'm allowed to have a bar mitzvah. I don't know how it works, but I love my
You don't have to be Jewish to have a bar mitzvah.
matzo ball soup and gefilte fish. I'm obsessed with that stuff.
But that's not Sephardic food. That's Ashkenazi food. Okay, one of the biggest things that really irks anyone with Sephardic ancestry, or especially people who consider themselves Sephardic as their identity, Ashkenazi food is a very specific food from a specific group of Jews and does not apply to Sephardic food. If you were to have food from Sephardic Jews, you would think that it was basically Mediterranean dishes. And in all honesty, a lot of dishes that you enjoy, that you probably think of as Mediterranean or things like that, have some sort of Jewish origin, and specifically Sephardic Jewish origin. So the whole liking, gefilte fish and matzo ball soup does not apply, even if he does have Sephardic Jewish ancestry. So, but all right, let's just continue.
I don't know how that. I did not expect that. Who knows? I might even be Maghrebi. I might be a little bit Berber. Who knows? Either way, that is awesome. So this is where I thought the story would end, but it still didn't. There's one thing left. 1.3% Native American.
Interesting.
I don't know where this came from. Most likely my mom's side, because we don't know anything about my mom's side.
Well, it could also come from his Asian side, just in the sense that Asian genetics and Native American genetics aren't as easily decipherable as many people think. So it's sometimes not surprising if someone has Asian ancestry and they get a very small percentage of Native American readings. And it's especially not surprising when someone with Native American ancestry gets small percentage of Asian readings. And I imagine with more updates, he may find out whether or not it's stronger and true, or if it's just a misread. And of course, if he were to test on some other sites to see were they defining it as Native American or were they defining it as Asian, that might actually help figure it out. But it certainly is possible. And if it is, 1.2%, then it is going to be pretty far back there. I mean, you're talking third, fourth great grandparent, fifth great grandparent, and further back.
Wow. Here's the thing, a lot of Americans have at least a little bit of genetic admixture with the Native Americans, because that's just kind of how things happened over time. So,
well, kind of, maybe. I mean, I think it's certain populations within America. It depends on how you define American, but one thing we discuss a lot in a lot of my videos is the fact that a lot of people will claim they have Native American ancestry or think they have Native American ancestry, but when it comes down to it, or at least proving it, most of them can't. So it's certainly possible that, a lot of people have Native American ancestry that can't prove it, but it's also more than likely that a lot of people that have no Native American ancestry think they have some Native American ancestry.
Granted, these DNA tests are not always completely accurate. There is a margin of error, but if this is in any way accurate, then that means I'm made up of 4 continents. That isn't, I thought it was only 2, but apparently I guess there's 4. I don't know, it kind of makes me feel like this kind of solidifies the fact that maybe I am meant to be in the geography world. Who knows? So basically, I'm a Black Jew, Samurai, Viking, Pocahontas. Yeah, that's gonna get me canceled on so many levels. But you can't, because it's literally who I am. I can say it if I am these things. Oh, the point is, this was awesome. This was fun. Who knows? If you are from any of these areas of the world, maybe I'm your cousin. This was fun. Hope you guys have a good one. Stay cool. Stay tuned.
All right, that was a pretty good episode. I think that there was a lot of things that he fell into of typical tropes when reading these things that I was hoping he wouldn't quite fall into, but he had a lot of asides of, but I do understand that this, and this, which was all the good stuff of like, well, yeah, you need to understand that when reading this. I think one of the biggest difficulties for a lot of people when trying to decipher these tests is when you don't really know much about your ancestry. And for someone like him, where he really doesn't know a whole lot about 25% of his family ancestry, that does leave a lot of questions open. Then again, it might also be coming from some lines that he thinks he knows, but he just doesn't know them quite as well as he thinks he does. I think it'd be really interesting to try to build out his family tree, and I know I would love to have him on my YouTuber family tree series. So once again, if you are watching this and you want a professional genealogist to dig into your family ancestry, figure out who your maternal grandfather is, build out that family tree, and learn your actual family story, and not just a vague, well, you might be Sephardic, Jewish, North African, and you might have some English, Irish, and maybe you have some Denmark, Sweden, Norway. Instead, let's name some people and tell you about what they were doing 200, 300, 400 years ago and what their lives were like. But most importantly, I would know how to go about trying to figure out your mom's father's identity through DNA. Now, earlier in the video, I do mention that I have Sephardic ancestry, which traces back to Morocco. And interestingly enough, one of the reactions I did was to someone who descends from that same exact family, and they talk about the family in the video. So if you'd like to check out the reaction, be sure to click right here. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. That really does help me out. You can also click right about here if you'd like to subscribe. It is completely free to do so. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Genealogist. I'm the Genealogist. See you in my next video.